Hi there. Thanks for joining me today. I'm Catherine. Up here on the north shore of Lake Ontario in the snowy country of Canada, at least for where I am right now. Boy, is it snowing outside. I'm looking out my window right now and it's definitely a marshmallow world. But I don't mind the snow. I always say I don't have to go out in it, so I don't mind it, but I feel badly for those who have to go out in it. Anyhow, thank you for joining me. If you're new here, welcome. I make journals out of, usually out of old books. I have on occasion created a book cover myself, and I never rule that out because that is fun. But usually I take old or unusual or vintage or antique books and I make them into journals, which I'm doing right now. But today I wanted to show you something that I did yesterday. Many of you who follow me know that I have my little paper press that I swear by. And I learned about it from Sea Lemon. I'm so happy to see so many other people now also using a paper press, book press, whatever you would like to call it, in their journal making. So now, hold on. I'm going to pause and lift my camera up a bit because I want to show you something. Okay, so this should be a bit better. Anyhow, so I was watching Nick the Booksmith's most recent video, and wait, it wasn't Nick's that inspired me. Oh, it was Four Keys Books. So they are a little a small business here near where I live. I mean, I say near, it's about 2 hours away from where I live, but in this great big huge world, that's close. Up in, I believe, Newmarket, Ontario, north of Toronto. And they, so far that's where, when I want original marbled paper, I order from them, and their paper is lovely that they create. But they also make books, and they also do videos that are very informative. And they put out a video just this past week, and they've got a beautiful book press. So pretty and so nice. One of those big old kind where you spin the wheel at the top and it lowers the platform down onto either your book or your papers or whatever it is you're pressing. And silly me thought, I'm going to look on Etsy and see if anyone's selling a big old book press, or if anyone makes the wooden ones, because they have a wooden one, and I don't see why a wooden one can't be made. I realize nowadays it's hard to find an antique iron book press, but a wooden one, I don't see why. Anyhow, I found one big old book press on Etsy, and it was almost $1,400, so that wasn't happening. But what I did see intrigued me and interested me, because with my book press that I made following Sea Lemon's instructions, just using, at the time, these were the only cutting boards I could find at my dollar store that had this handle. And this handle's not such a bad thing because I can grab it and then move it about. And it's certainly done the trick. But if you're like me and you're starting to develop arthritis in your hands, sometimes these wing nuts that you use to tighten the bolts down, to get them really tight and then to loosen them again, can be really hard on your hands. And I saw someone selling nicely made, it looked like they were nicely made, at least to me, book presses, paper presses, from their Etsy shop. And I thought, I can do that, not to take business away from them. I never intend to sell book presses. I can't imagine. It was still a lot of work and the cost to ship. So just type in book press and I'm sure this little shop will come up for you if you're interested. They certainly look nice, but I thought I can make myself one. So I did. And I was working on my signatures for New Worlds to Conquer. This book here. I was working on the signatures all week. I've been away for a couple of days, but I thought, well, let's put my signatures into my new book press. So I'm going to show you my new book press. And here it is. So I went to the dollar store and I got larger cutting boards, wooden cutting boards. But this is what intrigued me when I saw these big plastic wheels or turning screws on the ones that you could purchase from the Etsy shop. And I thought, oh, surely that would be easier on my hands than those tiny little wing nuts. And they are. So I went over to my Home Depot. My town is small enough, I don't have a lot of choice. We have 2 hardware stores in the whole town. So I went to Home Depot and I figured I had a better chance there. It's larger than the other hardware stores, mostly lumber and paint. Anyhow, so I went over and I got the new bolts, the new washers. I got shorter bolts this time than I got the first time for the smaller paper press, and I'll still use it. That's why I saved it. Sometimes I do have different sets of papers being pressed at a time. But these are certainly lovely for my hands. They weren't cheap. So the other book press, paper press, probably cost me less than $8 to make. These bolts, wing nuts, and washers are cheap, cheap, cheap. Like the bolts are, I think, $1. The washers and wing nuts are like 27 cents. The most expensive thing is the cutting board from Dollarama. But in this case, these plastic knobs, I think it's called a star knob, they cost more. So they were $6 each. But for the sake of my hands, well worth it. So I'm just going to open this up and we'll take out my signatures that I worked on this week. Oh, they look nice. Make sure I got them all out. I did. There we go. So I thought I'd show that to you. So there they are. I'm very happy with it. But like I said, I will never ever never be a competition to the little company that's earning money on Etsy. So I can't recall the name of it, but simply type in paper press and it will come up. Several different kinds will come up, but look for the one that has those nice knobs if you're interested. So these look nice, and I certainly do have more space now than what I did have. I was wondering if I was going to have more room to put more papers in my New Worlds to Conquer, and I definitely do now, because if we look and see, although that's a nice pinch, it's always nice to have a room. Oh, I might come backwards. Hold on, I'm going to pause and bring my camera up again. I guess I'm not. Anyhow, that actually is a really nice amount to be able to squeeze together, especially if I plan on putting in some fun things, which I do plan on putting in. And I haven't put in any pages from the actual book yet, except for one, which I'm going to show you in a second. I feel like I need to catch you up because I think 3 videos in a row last week. I think I did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, which, wow, talk about start the year off with a bang. But then I had things come up. I had weather come up. Boy, did we have a blizzard. Whoa-y. And then I got into getting the signatures ready, getting the cover illustration ready for New Worlds, and I did a little tiny bit of work in Sybil. So, but I wanted to show you, let's start here, what I did with the spine for New Worlds to Conquer, because the last time we got together and worked on the spine and we sewed in these threads, which I'm quite proud of myself for having the courage to do that. As you know, I don't enjoy sewing on camera. It's not one of my artistic strengths. But we did it, and hopefully that helps you, and I hope you feel courageous enough to give it a try yourself, even if you go to a thrift store and just buy any old book and practice on it. Just buy a cheap book. I know my thrift store, you can even buy old Reader's Digest books for the ones that aren't nice enough, like the really vintage ones. I love those from the 50s, 60s that have the different colored covers. I love those. But then they started switching over to these really cheap all one color covers that are just they're not as pretty and fun. And you can get those, I know, at my thrift store. I think they're usually about 50 cents each. Well, that's enough that you could get a couple of those and practice on it, right? So, and that's what I urge you to do. You may have good luck and get it right the first time, or you may be like me and need to have a practice run on a book that really won't matter, and then you'll feel a little more confident to conquer a book that you're really excited about and think would be a great junk journal. So but this was still floppy from when we were sewing. The spine was all it was, because I scraped out the old powdery signature liner. I had put a new lightweight signature liner in so that I could sew in these threads, but it still wasn't firm enough for my liking. So I got out my good old trusty file folder. I call it cardstock. It's a very light cardstock when you use old file folders, business file folders. And I curved it on my rolling pin, and then I did use one of the pages out of the original text block just to cover it. It's simply, you know what, for the sake of having each layer of my book be interesting, so that someday, if for some reason an owner somewhere down the road needed to take out this text block that I'm going to make and put in, maybe for some reason they need to take it out, they'll find something interesting inside, and they'll go, oh wow, look what this person must have done in here. And they'll see the interesting fabric, and they'll see this. It's kind of fun to excavate mysteries out of a book, because I often find in old books that they've used old papers, especially on the insides of the text block, and they'll use up old papers, obviously from their printing press room. So I did that in this case, just simply to give this spine a little bit more strength And by gluing it in, I used 3-in-1. It glues the backs of these threads. So although they're loose here, which gives it character, the backs are fully glued down. And I like that too. That makes me feel a little bit more confident in, you know, in its longevity. I mean, we work with paper and glue, so none of these things are permanent that we do. We just do the best we can, and somewhere along the way, I know that someone's going to need to do, you know, a little bandage work on these books that I make. They're not going to last forever. Paper and glue, we do our best, right? So let me show you the papers that I made for the signatures. And I think it was one of the few times, and I've made a few hundred of these books now, this is one of the few times that I actually had a lot of fun putting together my signature papers, the folios for the signatures. And I'll tell you why it was fun. Because I wasn't looking forward to it. It's one of my least favorite parts. And it's, of course, a very necessary part. But it's one of my least favorite parts of creating a book. And but what I did was I thought, all right, I'm going to challenge myself. I do better when I challenge myself with things. So I'm going to challenge myself, and I set a timer. And I decided to get all the signature papers ready in less than an hour. And it actually ended up making it fun, because then I even challenged myself by Frankensteining some papers together, and I'm going to show you so you'll see. But I just started grabbing papers. I always start with a plain tea or coffee dyed paper for the outside of each signature, and if you follow me, you know I always use tiny post-it notes so that I know I've got the right number of signatures, because sometimes I have a specific reason why I want the signature in the order that I want it in, and this is the way I know. And then when it comes time to sew them together, this is the way I know I'm sewing it in upright. Because I have sewn them in upside down before I started doing this. So you know, prepping that took quite a bit of the time, prepping these very first pages to get 9 of them ready. But that helps me a lot, because then I know from there I just start making sure I have the even number of pages, folios, to go into each signature. They're not all the same size. I really enjoy a journal that has a variety of shapes and sizes of papers. So we'll just take a little peek through. Lots of old papers in here. This is a genuine old children's composition book. This is a blank page that was out of an older book. You know how the fronts and backs of books have blank pages? I still save those, even if the rest of the book is no longer worth saving. I'll save the blank pages and throw them in halfway, folded in half. This one looked like it was going to crack, so I fortified it. A page from a book from 1897 on home remedies. Another page of really nicely yellowed binder paper. More paper. All these papers and pages mostly come from my thrift hunting. Many come from the generosity of Happy Mail and Happy Gifts. So if you see something in here that you shared with me, thank you very much. Oh, I'm folding things. I did sew. What did I sew in here? Let's see what I sewed, because I see threads. Oh, there we go. I did one of these. Oh, I'm going to sneeze. Hold on. Okay. I'm still feeling inspired by this kind of waterfall place to write in, to journal in, that I learned from Eva from Bohemian Crafting. Her son, I believe his name's Jacob, her young son, but obviously very creative minded. He's got his mama's creative mind because he did this in a journal he put together. And I thought, oh my goodness, I love that. So I created one. I had some offcut of this because you'll see the bigger page later on in the book. So, and I just did some fun stitching. Again, this is inspiration from Shinuki Art. We all share with each other. And I see little things that I do in my journals popping up in other people's journals, and it makes me smile. I love that we freely share the things we come up with each other. And I always try my best to remember who gave me the inspiration when I do something that I know I didn't think of. Art usually is recreated from the inspiration from someone else's and someone else's and someone else's. I love this. It's an old page out of a stamp album, and this was before Newfoundland became part of Canada. So I love that. They had their own stamps before we got lucky and we got them. This is a Frankenstein page, so I needed it I needed it bigger. I wanted to use this page out of a day book from 1985 that I tea-dyed. So I simply sewed this page onto it, and it was going to be a little too big, but there's a tuck spot there. So, and then it was serendipitous because the next page along was out of a 1972 sewing book. So that was fun. This is from a 1922 atlas from the Netherlands. And so I think that looks pretty in there. Some more of that vintage binder paper. I love how yellow that is. This is out of a 1950s teacher's reader's book. And it's just got some of those really yummy Dick and Jane type illustrations in it. So and again, because the timer was going, I just started grabbing and folding and grabbing and folding and making it fit. And I always look for what is pleasing to my eye as far as a waterfall for the different sizes and shapes and their placement. This is from a ledger book that when I went antiquing and book hunting with Nancy and Alice recently. This one's interesting, this Frankenstein paper here, because it's two completely different shapes of paper. I hope that's evident to you. I wanted to use this receipt here. It's from the 1900s because you can see the 19 up here for the date. I coffee dyed it or tea dyed it. I think it's coffee. That looks too brown. My tea, I like Tetley tea, and it's an orange Pico tea. So it can have a slightly orange shade to it. And I had an offcut from that 1922 map. So I simply used masking tape to make a hinge, and I pre-distress inked it before I put them together. So the cool thing about that is that you'd never know. When you turn this page, you're assuming that the other side somewhere in the signature is going to be the same size as this, and it's not. But once you get over to here, you don't know what is on the other side of this. So it just shows you can mix and match, and they don't necessarily have to match in order to create the folios to go into your signatures. So my focus with my journals always is to make sure I give plenty of journaling space for the new owner. So that's space that I consider writable. And this one's out of a genuine old ledger. I love when they have the numbers already up in the corners. An old, it was from a book called Everybody's Cyclopedia. I need to find the date, or I might have written it on the other side. I had to reinforce the fold there, so I made use from that gardening book again. Yeah, I didn't write the page. I'm going to have to find the date. Everybody's Cyclopedia. I do know the book. So, no sewing in that one. Let's see if we did any Frankensteining in here. Oh, we did some Frankensteining over here. So again, timer's going. I got all this done. I'm so proud of myself. But it was inspiring. So I'm going to have to remember that trick. So this ledger paper was 8.5 by 11. And I wanted to keep it upright. So what I did was... Oh, and another thing I did in this book is, for these signatures, is I used a lot of tear edge on the flat edge of a ruler. So here, I've done books where I've done a torn edge with this kind of a ruler, or with this side of a handmade torn edge ruler, and then I've done a torn edge. The roundabout papers, I literally hand tore those ones, so that was tricky and fun. So this time I just used the straight edge of a ruler, just for some variety, for my own, for fun for me. So I took what I ripped off the bottom, I sewed along the side here. I glued it down and sewed it on. So I like how that turned out. And it's kind of Frankenstein-y. So that made that signature interesting. 1940s shorthand book. This is a book that I found at a thrift store, a guest book for yachting. I like guest books, and that's a yachting one. This was from a few batches of paper that I found, and I tea-dyed them myself. They're huge for a check register. The sheets are huge, so I was able to get 2 folios out of 1 sheet by Frankensteining them. So you'll see this end is going the wrong way, because there's those holes right there that you see over here. So this piece along here actually came from down here. So I sewed it on. I did some Chinooki tangles, and then I did some more of the Jacob Waterfall journaling space, and I still have to I want to do some Chinooki tangle sewing here. I guess that can be an official term, Chinooki tangles. And what else? Another guest book page. Did I Frankenstein that? No, I didn't. I've just left that short. And don't be afraid to do that when you're making folios to put in your signatures. The fold does not have to be in the center of your piece of paper. It can be off-center and create an interesting little piece over here. Oh, you're going to see some Frankensteining coming up there. So this sheet of paper, I wanted it upright because the lines are going this way. It makes writing for journaling easier. I want this to be mostly an all sorts book, but with a little bit of an explorer theme. So there's going to be a few maps in here, and this is just from a high school atlas book. Actually the same, it's not the exact one. It's not mine, but it's the one that I used when I was in high school, public school and high school. So it's kind of weird using books that I grew up actually using, sitting at a desk in a classroom. But you can find them everywhere now at thrift stores. and it was a little too long. I measured wrong when I created this folio, so I simply folded it up and created a tiny little tuck spot down there. So a little Frankensteining there. Page from a book, a French book, 1928. Some more of that yellowed binder paper. This is again from a record book because it's numbered number 7, which cracked me up a bit because it's actually in the 7th signature, and that was serendipitous. So, oh, and that page needed lengthening, so I glued down and then did some Chinooki sewing. No, I didn't Chinooki any. I just did some wacky sewing, and then did a tip out because the steno paper was too wide. So the timer, as you can see, forced me to really use my imagination to make the most of just grabbing papers. This is the first time I've used a folio out of this book that I recently found on Hebrew grammar. So I was excited to pick a page for the first time out of that book. And I was able to find out this book was from 1907. So that's an old book. Here's the gardening page that I used a lot of the offcuts because it was from a really big book. So I made the most I could out of the offcuts. So one of those little waterfall journaling areas is made out of some of it. And I used some of the papers to reinforce some of the folds in some of the papers. This is from some booklets Nancy gave me a long while back. Little books that Dr. Miles Cures Your Piles books. And I guess she knew I'd like them. And, so I thought, oh, it's time to use a page out of one of the Dr. Miles books. And I used masking tape again that I simply I cut it in half because I didn't want it this wide. This is the contractor grade, so I believe it's after 72 hours. I'd have to read the fine print again, but I think 3 days. So if you haven't removed it within 3 days, it becomes permanent. So what I do is I just tear some off and stick it down on something plastic, and then distress inked it, and then cut it in half and used it like that. Some more of, I used a lot of my that binder paper, so that turned out cool. Any more Frankensteining back here? No. There's some handwriting in the Hebrew grammar book that I just love. It's so tiny. So, and then at the end here, because there's 9 signatures in this book, just some fun little pages that I've folded. Here's another part of that huge page that I told you from that check register. This is a leftover sheet from the book that I created into a Christmas book this year, the Little Holly Girl. So this is a leftover from that book. And I forget what book I pulled that out of. So I reinforced it because it was going to crack with some faux cellophane tape, tea-dyed paper, offcuts, and a little bit more of that binder paper. I was really enjoying it. So there we go. So that's how I had fun. How am I for time? Oh, I'm really over time. That's how I had fun for one of the first times. Let me get that down in there. Oh, you're sticking out. There we go. For one of the first times creating the signatures, by challenging myself, by setting the timer and going, all right, I'm going to get this over with. And it worked, and it was fun, and I loved that I even was able to get Frankensteining done at the same time. So I'm over 30 minutes here. Fortunately, my new phone can handle over 30 minutes, but that's not always a good thing either because I can talk too much. I have worked on what's going to be the cover for New Worlds. So I've made, I was going to put a really pretty mat on it, and I thought, no, I want it grungy looking. So I used some wallpaper I have. I have some really cool wallpaper. Isn't this neat? And so I used a square of it. I hand tore it. I inked it. I crunched it up and then smoothed it out again. So that's why it's really wrinkly. I inked it. I did a whole lot of Shinuki looping here with the threads. And then I purposefully glued her onto it a little bit askew so that I will still glue her properly upright, and hopefully this will be evident that it's a little bit crooked. And I really like how that looks, and I think that's going to be really cool. So I'm very excited about this book. So, and I think that's what I'm going to do, but I don't have to do it on camera. I'm more happy with sharing with you the ideas I came up with by setting the timer to make my signatures the other day. So if you also have a hard time sharing or getting your signatures together, some people really, really enjoy it. I guess there's always aspects of bringing together a junk journal that everyone's always got their favorite things that they love. I love creating the cover, and I love choosing the end papers to go in the cover. That's probably my favorite thing to do, is choosing the book, choosing what I'm going to do to the cover, if anything, to zhuzh it up a bit, and then choosing the perfect end papers to go inside the cover. I love that the best, but I love it all, or else I wouldn't still be doing it. Thanks for joining me today. I had a few more things I wanted to talk about, but I'm going to have to save that for the next time we get together. I hope you have a great next day or two until we can have another chat. If you've had your coffee or tea this morning, I hope it was delicious, and I hope wherever you are, it's warm and comfy. Take care. We'll talk soon. Bye.